Staff and Learner Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission with the eponymous title of the Pearson Commission, which may be renamed the Preston Commission after this session. So I'm Simon Gregory, I'm the Clinical Director of the session. I'm going to hand over actually to our Programme Head, Teresa, who will introduce herself and start the session off.
Thank you, Simon. So my name is Teresa Hewitt-Moran. I'm the Programme Lead for the Mental Wellbeing and Learner Commission. We're going to have half an hour in which we're going to talk about the background to the Commission, the approach that we've taken, some of our early findings from the first phase, how we plan to approach the second phase, but more importantly, hearing your views on our approach. So last year, the Secretary of State asked our Chair, Sir Keith Pearson, to lead a review on the wellbeing and mental health of students, learners and staff within the NHS. You may have seen that it was introduced in the workforce draft strategy that was published in December. So we've been looking specifically at the national and international published evidence, looking at good practice, successful interventions, speaking to national experts and hearing what they have to say, and the idea being that by the end of the Commission's second phase, that we'll be publishing a report with recommendations. So within the first stage, that's been January to June, we've established a team of 4 clinical fellows who've been undertaking the majority of the research. We've also appointed an expert academic panel to support the evidence review, and we've had a number of meetings with key opinion leaders in the sector. So we thought it was important to understand the challenges within the 4 themes. So before you become a healthcare student, so issues like the preparation for healthcare careers, opportunities for work experience, appropriate careers guidance, those kinds of issues of before you become a healthcare student. We've been looking at the challenges for our undergraduate students, so perhaps some of the challenges for traditional students going to university, moving away from home for the first time, and the challenges of isolation and issues such as that, but also our newer types of undergraduate students that may be apprentices that are earning as they learning as they earn, so therefore having experiences, challenges around those of being a student, but also being a paid employee. We've been looking at challenges around postgraduate learners, so our postgrad medical and dental education, but also the broader non-medical postgraduate trainees as well, and then the more broader all-staff challenges. We found that we needed to focus our approach on particular key lines of inquiry, and this has been across all 4 themes. So we've looked at culture within the NHS and within universities, myths and challenges within those cultures, the high expectations that can be placed on learners at all of those levels, isolation and lack of support, some of the challenges from societal changes, including positive forward-moving type of challenges, and generation differences or changes. And as you can see, those key lines of inquiry have been relevant in all 4 sectors that we've been looking at. Simon, would you like to look at some of the findings from our first phase?
Thank you. So I've intentionally gone back a slide because at this point I need to ask you all not to photograph or tweet any of this content of the next bits, because this is, as Teresa has said, a 2-stage report. What we will be doing is launching this at our board on the 15th of July. It is really important when you want to land things with many sectors, including with politicians, that you land it in the right way. We want to give you a few of the headlines of what we've heard, but what we don't want to do is steal any of the thunder from the future. So I hope you'll understand that. And actually, I'm really pleased that the first time that we're airing some of this is with such a diverse and actually young audience, because you're actually the reason that we started this. Because we were hearing some things that didn't ring true. We kept hearing of distress amongst the workforce and amongst our learners, that rings true. But then we kept hearing about the importance of mindfulness and resilience, and it would all be okay if people just did that. And we actually heard from some of our learners who said, Why do you think 20 minutes with an app is going to solve all the problems? It's much more complex than that. And our executive, our board said, let's listen to that. Let's find out what's going on. Let's really look at the evidence. So in these 2 stages, the first stage was to say, what is already out there? What are we hearing from the people affected? What's already in the research? And let that guide us in stage 2. So these are the areas we want to explore. We're not saying they're definitely the issue at the moment. They're what we want to explore. And the intention of mentioning it to you today is to hear your thoughts and to ask you, as we go into stage 2, to engage with us. So I am going to go very quickly through these and not read every point on the slide. We started with school-age children and said, what's going on at school that might be making a difference? What's going on in childhood? And we saw a number of things. There's a phrase, helicopter parenting, which is, I actually encountered this when my daughter, now 22, was 6, and she fell out with one of her classmates. And next thing we knew, her parents were in the school saying, you've got to make her be friends with my daughter again because she's upset. We hear about competitive sport not happening. But then we started to look at things like social media. Now, being of a certain age, I thought social media was the cause of the mental ill health, with this need to be liked and to like everything, and how many likes were you getting on Facebook or on Instagram and such like. But then we heard stories the other way around of people using it for support. We've engaged with the Tea and Empathy group on the support there. People using the apps or social media for decision aids. Equally, I'll tell you, my wife had an invitation to go out for drinks at lunchtime, and she just replied to say, sorry, I'm already busy, but thanks anyway. And my daughter said, oh, you can't do that. You old people, I didn't like that, by the way, but you old people need to understand that you've got to land it. It must be at least 6 messages. So it's like, oh, babes, thanks so much. Would have loved to, and I won't go through the whole lot, but we realise that we've got a lot of learning to do. And there is something about careers advice. Now, I went to a really grotty comprehensive school in Essex where the careers advice was, you're a boy, you're going to work at Ford's, or you're a girl, you're going to be a secretary. And I didn't realise until my 3rd year at medical school that you did it on call, out of hours. I didn't realise the health service did that. And what we've found is that some of the careers advice in schools still isn't actually much better. We also want to really sort out, I'm looking at Ian here because I know that this is something dear to his heart, work experience in the NHS not being just for those people who happen to have the connections, but actually for all. And that's one of the ways that we'll really address diversity. But we are seeing issues with numeracy. We are seeing issues with the general decline. There's a lot of evidence of the decline of the mental well-being of our young people. You notice I use well-being because we really want to talk about the well-being of everybody. We moved on to look at our undergraduate students, and we're really seeing some evidence of the difficulties of transition. Especially we're hearing if you go through clearing and end up where you weren't planning to go. And we've got to look more at that, at loneliness and isolation. But also there's a stigma that's still got to be addressed. We heard from both nursing and medical students that they think that if they admit that they have a mental health problem, they won't be able to graduate. And we've got to address that because that isn't true, and it's really got to be looked at. And we are looking very much at the quality of the placements, but also what interventions do work. I actually do use a mindfulness app, and I do find it helpful, but I don't think it solves everything else in life. We move to our postgraduate trainees, and one of the first things we found is that almost all the research is on doctors. And actually we need the research on doctors, but for example, paramedics deal with a lot more of the stresses than the doctors do, and I could continue. I don't know if anyone saw the BBC ambulance series when they looked at the Birmingham crash. I saw a 21-year-old paramedic there that I was just so impressed with her empathy and her understanding. But also, we've got to look at those stresses, and we need much more research onto this. Transitions, again, being key, but also looking at the sort of people that go into healthcare go into it because they want to make a difference, and then often they find that the work they're doing is quite traumatic and traumatizing. And then simple things. We've heard from nursing students that go to their placement, they've got their laptop with them because they've got their dissertation to do, and the little bit of lunchtime they get, they're going to do it. But then they find there's no lockers, and they're not allowed to take their bag onto the ward because of infection risk. So how on earth does that look after them? What about the people that do a week of nights, are too tired to drive home, but there's nowhere to sleep? and the effect that has on them. So we've got a lot that we're already doing with the those things listed on those bottom couple of bullet points, but we want to look into this much more and again hear from you. And then we said, actually, if we're looking at learners, actually, many of the things that I've covered in those slides, or were in bullet points I didn't cover, are actually about caring for all of our staff and caring for each other. The mental well-being of our staff contributes to patient care. I would like to suggest that a healthy workforce leads to more healthy patients. And in particular, there's a report called Thriving at Work that we see as really important. And again, even just this week, our board said bullying and undermining are not acceptable in the health service, and we need to work together to address that. So a number of points that we have whistle-stopped through, and I didn't see anybody taking a photograph, so I would like to say thank you to you for that. But I hope you might see some bits in there that will resonate with you. I actually hope you'll see some bits that don't, or where you might possibly disagree with us, because we want you to engage with us in stage 2 and to encourage others too, because we really want to get this right. We believe there's an opportunity to actually make a difference to the well-being of the entire NHS and care, health and care workforce. And really important that when we talked about learners, you'll notice we didn't use the old titles. When we talked about learners, we mean all. So for example, apprentices, and I talked to our fabulous apprentice at lunchtime. I think she might be in the room actually, so she might be embarrassed now, but I talked with a fabulous, hello, she is, yeah, hi. It's really important that we look after the whole workforce, and in HEE we're really committed to that. So it's time now for us to listen to you, but I would offer you that email address and say, if you've got any thoughts on any of this, we'd really like to hear from you. What we'll try to do now, if the lights could come up, I don't think we've got anyone with microphones in the room now, so you're going to just have to shout, but any thoughts that you've got, do please let us know. And yeah, you can photograph that one. Thank you very much. So if we could have the lights up, please. Anybody, any thoughts or any comments you'd like to offer? Sir?
And this one, I think it was one of the first slides that mentioned GMC and the research done into the well-being of doctors under investigation. And is there any sort of progress on that? Because I read it, I think it was in the BNJ about the high rates of alcoholism, suicide, drug abuse, people who are, and there doesn't seem to be any support for doctors who are being investigated.
Yes, I can give a bit of an answer, and you can chip in if you want to give any answer. I realise my back's to you, and I apologise for that. We've already engaged with Mary Agnew, who's leading that work, and Dame Denise Coyer, who is leading one of the other GMC reviews, has agreed to join our commission. I believe they're progressing on it. We've heard some of those things. I think there's some discussion about whether the model is more adversarial and whether it ought to be, what's the phrase that David used? Inquisitorial, thank you. It's always good to have someone here that knows what they're talking about. When we find one, we'll get a quiz. But it's not just about doctors there. So if you look at I think there are 9 healthcare regulators, and I believe 6 of them have an adversarial or judicial type approach. So if you nursing students in the room would, or nurses would say that their regulator may have a similar approach as well. So there is a lot more to be done, and it's really distressing. And not just going through that, but if you have a complaint, you might get that process through, if you're a learner, through your educational route. You might get it through your regulator. You might get sued, and certainly, for example, if you're a GP, it might go through the performers list as well. So there's often a quadruple jeopardy, and actually most of us we get up in the morning because we want to do good. So if you've made a mistake, that's something you feel terrible about anyway. If you haven't, it breaks your compact because somebody's made a complaint where you didn't do wrong. So there's a whole load of issues, and there is a lot going on to it, but I don't think it's readily solved. And that's why one of the things we believe we will conclude is areas where more work is needed or more research is needed. But one of the things we're keen on is that this isn't a report that sits on a shelf. We in HE are going to act on it, but we're going to lobby for others too as well. Thank you. And thankfully, there's a microphone right next to you because Helen obviously acted on what I said. So thank you, Helen.
Hello, my name is Lucia. I'm a third year student paramedic. And I just wanted to share like a positive experience from my university and like the support that I've gotten. So I know like on placement, as you were saying, paramedics go to quite severe things. I know some of my colleagues have been to like Grenfell shootings, some very horrible things. And I had an experience recently where I had to work on a guy that was hit by a train. It didn't actually hit me how much it affected me until about a month later. But I got multiple welfare checks. I got through about 12 emails with my lecturers before I actually decided I needed a bit of help with coping. And they offered me 2 counselling services, one with the ambulance service that I was working with and then one from the university. And I accepted one, and there was a point where it was a bit hit and miss whether I thought I'd be able to carry on uni because I thought it affected me that much, but the counselling that I was offered and the continuous determination to help me even so long after it happened is probably what kept me in uni. So I'm really happy this is happening, basically.
So, thank you. Thank you firstly for sharing that, because I realise that's a very personal story. Thank you also for coming into the NHS as a paramedic, and actually I'd say that to each of you. Thank you for coming in and what you're doing. But also, could you please email us on that address? Because one of the things we learned in stage 1 of this report is we kept reading some quite stark stories. And when you read, I read 4 in detailed literature reviews in 30 hours on aeroplanes, and by the end of it I was really very miserable. And actually, we need to hear some of that best practice and good stories as well, because Ian talked earlier about how that doesn't get shared out. And that support you had, and that people decided to do 12 emails, not give up when they'd sent the 1 and you said no, you didn't need it. We need to hear that as well. We have determined that every evidence day of the Commission will finish with at least the last quarter being about positivity and stories that can be shared so that we can make a positive difference in that transfer. And I think your story is really important, so thank you. Yeah, it's a microphone coming to you. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Deborah. As you can tell, I'm neither young nor a doctor or a nurse, allied health professional student. And I'm coming to the NHS party quite late, as you can tell.
I couldn't actually, but carry on anyway.
I'm 20-year-old with a hard paper round. No, I'd just like to say that the support I've received from my institution has been fantastic. I've had my own mental health issues, and I have a family, 2 young children. So, excuse me.
Don't worry, take your time. We really appreciate you sharing with us.
I'd like to know that with this, what you're doing, that when I go in to the NHS, I'll still have that wonderful support. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do our best. And thank you again for sharing. No, you did great. Don't apologise. You don't need to. It's great. Thank you.
Hello, I'm a student nurse at the University of York. I just wanted to say I'm doing a postgraduate qualification. I myself have also had mental health issues for a very long time. Basically, I suffer with depression, anxiety as well, and it's very much an open thing for me, and I think it's very important that it should be. The support that I've received from my university has been absolutely fantastic, and it does make a massive difference to my education. I do think, however, for example in placement, that it is a harder thing. There is still this, I don't know if it's an older generation thing, the having a good work ethic, that it can appear to them that they might think I'm skiving almost if they've had to have time off. I do feel very much that they think that I'm skiving. University, not at all, but as I say, I do think it's an older thing. I think definitely the support that I receive from my the other people in my cohort. I think it's maybe a younger generational thing. Depression and anxiety, all mental health issues are very well spoken by young people. I think it is a newer thing that people are starting to talk more about. I personally think it's because of fast-paced life. I can't quite keep up, which is very normal for me anyway. But yeah, definitely I think it's something that needs to be more recognised from a staff sort of point of view, that it's not because you don't want to be there, and not to feel or be made to feel like that you are trying to not be there when you clearly do. I wouldn't leave a job that I got paid to do very well for to be a nurse on, well, nothing if I didn't want to be there.
No, thank you. Thanks again for sharing, because I think it's really important. What I would tell you is that in the last week, Ian and I both separately have met with colleagues in NHS Improvement, talking about how our work works together. We did some research and did a session next on values, and Louisa did this. When we first started doing values-based recruitment, we piloted it with the University of Essex and Andy Ruskin University, and we got some fantastic students in on that, but then they said, well, that's great, you've recruited us on values, but when we go out into the NHS, we don't see those values manifested. So we started to work on that. We are going to need to work together on this, and we are going to need to make a difference both to those that are alongside us in the workplace, but also to ourselves. There's this concept of presenteeism, which is however ill you are, you feel like you've still got to go to work because you're letting other people down. We know, for example, that if, I'm going to go outside of mental well-being and mental health for a minute, that if people go to work with the flu, they spread it and they cause more of a problem, and yet we still talk in that sense. I'm only checking the clock because the session started late, and for you to know, we are finishing in 5 minutes, so you've got 5 minutes to move to your next session. If you're in here, you've got 5 minutes of rest, but all the sessions have been shortened slightly. So when I look at the clock, I'm not being rude, I'm just making sure that I get as much in as I can. Can we come to this gentleman here, and then we'll come to one of our Labour representatives, Manoj, here afterwards, and then probably it's going to be our time. Are you all right?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to just thank you both for your presentation. It's been very good, and to everyone here. So I'm Andrew Statham from the University of Leicester. We currently have a health enhancement programme that's been rolled out for the last 2 years for the new undergraduates, which incorporates a lot of health benefits and resilience training for not just our university career, but for later on. I'm also currently running a mindfulness practice group, not just for our medical students, but for everyone else. I found these things have benefited a lot of people. I was wondering if there's a larger thing going on with the NHS nationally for all medical staff, including nurses, healthcare practitioners, paramedics and stuff like that, and what your plans are for incorporating those sides of things.
Our plans at the moment are to hear about those sorts of things, and that's why we're there. That's why I think it's great that you've shared that with us. My patch is Midlands and East, and one of our offices in Leicester, so I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to come along and see what's happening and talk with you and some of your peers and hear the effects of it. Because what we actually want to do is find out what's out there and then scale it up and share it.
I think the challenge is at the moment we know what we know, so we really do need, as my plea, to please contact us and tell us about your experiences, negative or positive, and particularly the good practice experiences, so that we can come back to you and find out more.
So again, we'll probably try and grab you in a minute, but otherwise can you email us on that and we'll be back in touch. Thank you. Manoj, last word.
So, good afternoon everyone. I'm Manoj Mistry. I'm a lay representative from Manchester Family Carer. So I'm going to make an observation from my work with the Health and Care Professionals Councils, because I sit on their accreditation panel for health courses. In fact, next week is my 13th visit in 3 years. So what I've personally noticed is when we visit some of the former polytechnics, the pastoral and welfare support they provide to their allied health professional students, or learners as I should now say, is absolutely superb. And 2 examples spring to mind, which is Sheffield Hallam University and Wolverhampton University. And from my experience in auditing and accrediting these programs, the pastoral support they provide is second to none in comparison to some of the older traditional universities. Just an observation.
Great. I think it's going to go that way. Thank you very much. So, I hope you found some of that interesting. I hope you would like to engage with our commission, because we think there's a real opportunity here for us in HEE, as system leaders, to make a difference to the well-being and the mental health of everybody in the NHS. But you are the reason that we're here, and we really want to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.